like a record player being a record being played on a loop over and over and over again, right? Are you ever hurt something on your body and you're fine, and then all of a sudden you remember that you hurt something? Have you ever seen little kids like when you see them and they hurt their leg and you're like, and then they're playing and you're like, I thought your leg was hurt, and they're like, oh yeah, my leg, and they start limping and stuff, and it's kind of funny, but so we kind of do that same thing, right? Where, we're in pain and our hand, we hurt our wrist, right? But we're doing all these things throughout the day. And then we remember that we hurt our wrist earlier and you start to feel the pain there, right? This is essentially what he said. Sometimes the body is healed. But as he mentions, the brain has a PTSD on that PTSD from the pain that they felt in their wrist when it was actually hurting, right? And a lot of this stuff basically comes down to one thing and one thing only. It's these opioids, right? It's the highly addictive opioids and us feeling like we should take something at all times because, you know, we shouldn't have to feel pain, right? Um, as you can see here, the state's death, drugs, overdose death spiked by more than 75% from 2017 to 2021. So the thing is this here, right? Do you need something for every bit of pain that you have, right? And you've probably done it, or people who've gone to the doctor, and you talk to them later, and they're upset, and you're like, "What happened? Like, what did he say?" I don't know. Like, he didn't even give me a prescription, and you're like, "Did you make an appointment to get a prescription?" But you're operating in your mind because he says no, just go home and rest it and put some ice on it. And people are upset because they didn't get a prescription for drugs. And these people aren't addicted to drugs or anything. They just feel like I should get something so I don't have to feel any pain. And, the argument is pushing through that little pain there could ultimately help later on and stuff because it can help you to actually get over it. It can help the body get through it. It can help for you not to have pain associated with that area of your body and things like that. And hopefully that thing is not being on a loop over and over again because it was so bad at the time. Just a couple more things. One, um, it's a big deal because the ACA is not going to be given a lot of money now to, um, as you can see, the Affordable Care Act premiums are set to rise by an average of 35 next year. So that's what this whole thing is about that I'm talking to you about. Um, Looks like I'm kind of getting you primed and ready to accept some of that pain. You know what I mean? And understand that it's not a bad thing to feel it as you decide whether or not to spend X amount of dollars to go to the emergency room or go see a doctor or pay that expensive copay because of the fact that you can't afford health care, right? And things like that. And, if you look here, nearly two-thirds of Texans who get the coverage earn 150% of the federal poverty limit, right? So, which is basically 23,000 for a family, for an individual, or 48,000 for a family of four. So ultimately, these people aren't making much money. You don't have a lot of money. You can't really go to a doctor much, but you're feeling pain in an area that you feel like you shouldn't feel pain in, right? And this is like I feel like a Walmart manager trying to help you fill out a form to get some food stamps, and you work for me. So you work there. I'm the manager. I'm your manager, but I'm helping you fill out a form to get food stamps and assistance because you don't make enough. I'm just explaining to you that this is not all bad, right? To have a little pain, probably, as the old folks used to say, right? It'll make you tougher and things like that, and ultimately, it'll allow for you to push through these things. So pain, some pain is not bad, and things like that. Um, uh, just an interesting take on all this, and a good time to talk about it, especially since people are about to lose a lot of coverage and money and things like that and assistance. when it comes to healthcare. It's a lot, huh? It's a whole lot. Um, the the president so the president is clearly not happy with the Epstein files being released. He didn't want them to be released at all. But then he's like, I don't care, release them. I don't care who looks at them. Anybody can watch it. Anybody can read them and stuff like that. Now the thing is that he can release them at any time, but he's allowing Congress to go through the process of releasing these things. You know, he has turned his back on Marjorie Taylor Greene. He called her Marjorie Trailer Trader Green. You know, um, because she didn't. Because she's like, what's the big deal? The thing is that what he's not recognizing is that Marjorie Taylor Greene believes that he's innocent. She's just trying to figure out why is he trying to help out Epstein, who was a criminal, right? Um, John, you crazy. Uh, but and yeah, I logged on this weekend. That only came to me. They didn't go to everybody. Everybody didn't see that one. But I logged on this weekend and I was like, what is happening with Trump and Bill Clinton and stuff? And there's so I don't know what this is all about. I'm so confused. But I do know that this um that that apparently Epstein emailed and said that he's the only one who can take down Trump. Now, here's the thing: a lot of conspiracies out there, lots of things. So I don't know how that worked out or what happened and anything like that. But I do know that if you run on a platform and convince people of something, you can't just tell them, "Nah, I was just messing with y'all." It's not real. Like you're gonna have to show someone something. If you remember, two dudes ran into a pizzeria, started shooting at the menu, I guess, on the wall, and behind the guys, the people on the counter, and said, "Hey, oh, we came to get the kids," and they said, "What kids? You know the kids." He was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And they're like, we don't have any trouble with you guys, but we want the kids. That's why we came here. Where is the freaking basement? And they're like, we don't have a basement. No, you're holding kids in the basement. And come to find out, I guess Hillary Clinton had sealed up the basement with dirt and earth. Um, I'm just joking. There was no basement. And apparently, Hillary Clinton was supposed to have children, child sex slaves down there. And people came in there to save the children. Now, if people are going in to save the children like that, and these people are full fledged, I hate child predator people, which is good to be that way, then you're not going to convince these people that the records of a child predator shouldn't be out there, and anyone associated with that predator shouldn't be out there. So that's where we are, people. I emailed you all extra credit. Hopefully, you'll get a chance to get that done. Um, so that should be exciting. That extra credit, I'll be creating links for that under your extra credit tab very soon, or at least after class. I'll have that done, or shortly, or later today. I'll have it done at least. So you'll be able to upload that. It is due by the date, I believe I said December 2nd. So it's due that date. So you know, whatever it says in the email, that's the date there. So yeah, check them out, D. It's gonna be great. Um, very good films. Very good films. I think so anyway. All right. I will tell you this: that one of the film, um, so so part of the class, like part of the class remembers um, education prior to that, and the other part of the class only know education after that part. So when you see the film, you'll know what I'm talking about, D, and you know, and Emily, you know, you'll see what I mean. You'll say, "Oh, okay, this was my education." Now, if you're homeschooled, then you probably got good education. That didn't have to do any of that there, but if not, then you'll be able to see how things are run here in Texas. All right. Okay. Any questions about anything? Da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. Let's see. So we're on to the courts again and law and due process and all that kind of stuff. So, oh, I'm so sorry. So basically, so how we were gonna do this was so we were having a lecture next Tuesday, right? That's what it says on the syllabus. Um, so basically, what I'm doing is that I am using more of the actual lecture day today, and I'm pushing the grave injustice back some. So ultimately, you can just watch a video Tuesday and not have to show up to class, but it'll count as class time. So, all right, here we go. So we talked about the cores. We talked about civil cases. This is basically not about innocence or guilt or anything like that. It's basically who has the most evidence and things like that. Um, and and ultimately, it's relief, it's some sort of payment or something like that at the end. Um, criminal cases, criminal cases. It deals with proper behavior and morality. There's a plea of guilt or not guilty, and ultimately the government is charging you on behalf of the people. It results in some sort of punishment, as we'll talk about very soon in this course. So we got appeals court. Every court in Texas is an appeals court except a municipal court. And you do waive your right to double jeopardy when you appeal the case, meaning that you can be retried even if there is something that's found like DNA or something like that. Um, Remember, we do have different levels of government. I mean, of courts, the municipal court is the lowest court. You cannot appeal to that. But every other court above it, you can appeal. So you can appeal the municipal court ruling to the justice of the peace, or to the county level judge, or to the district judge, or to the court of appeals. Right. So you can appeal to all these. You can the justice of the peace can appeal up higher. The county courts can appeal higher. So all these things can appeal up to things higher than them. You just can't. You don't appeal down, right? Oh, I should tell you all this. Let's just say that you're found guilty in a district court and found guilty of murder, and they sentence you to death. Now that case is automatically appealed to the Court of Criminal Appeals, right? If the Court of Criminal Appeals, if they find you guilty as well, you can then go to the Supreme Court. Now, also, if you're found guilty for other things, right? Like, let's just say that you're found guilty for um, having, a bunch of drugs in your trunk, and you don't believe that you should have been found guilty for that. You can appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, they're probably not taking your case, but you can appeal to them. This is not like the workplace where you're forced to go to the next one and the next one and the next one. You can appeal to the Supreme Court anytime. Supreme Court is probably not taking it. There was a case, 2019 or so. This case happens. because I remember, I mean, they were talking about this case. So in 2020 is when everything it was actually going down, but everything has shut down, so it became this big thing. But ultimately, so we get a guy, he gets pulled over for having, so he gets pulled over, and he's in a rental car. He is then found. So they search his trunk. They found a bunch of drugs. They found a bunch of guns and things like that. Ultimately, they took him to jail. Clearly, he ended up in prison. He was found guilty. So he appealed the case, right? And his argument, it was basically, first off, um, because what they said was, we pulled him over because he wasn't. This is why they pulled him over. They pulled him over because he wasn't on. It was a rental car that his girlfriend had rented. He wasn't on it, right? So his girlfriend, she rented a car. He was driving the rental car. So the police was like, we had a right to pull him over because he wasn't on the actual contract, right? Question: how did the police know that he wasn't on the contract?
They don't know that until they pull you over. It's an illegal stop.
And that's what happened. You know what I mean? If anything, if anything, it's a fine from the freaking rental car company. I believe it was Hertz, right? And Hertz even said we didn't want, we don't believe in that. We're thankful that the police did it, but that's not something that Hertz wasn't really riding with the police on that one. How about that? And so he was found guilty. So he goes to prison. They let him. So they say no, it has to go back and be looked at again because it was an illegal search. Because you still couldn't tell them why did you pull him over, right? And they couldn't. And ultimately, from what I understand, it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, look at it again. And this was the one that it was one of the first cases that Supreme Court did of the year because normally Supreme Court cases come out in June. But this came out like mid to late May, and they were like, nah, no, this needs to be redone and things like that. So, you have these type of cases here where you can go to Supreme Court if you feel like the state is messing you over and things like that. Um, we also got the case where we had the guy who didn't want to make a gay cake or a cake for a gay couple. I'm sorry, a gay cake. Like, what's a gay cake? I don't know. But they didn't want to make a cake for a gay couple. Um, and that was able to go to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court told the state to look at that again, kind of redo that thing, and that needs to be fixed. But ultimately, I mean, look, I don't argue with people at drive-throughs because they're messing with my food. I'm definitely not gonna force you to make me a cake if you don't like me. I've seen I've seen some movies, so I've seen The Help. I'd rather not. All right. Da, 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 da. So we talked about that. The justice of the peace, 4-year terms. Almost anybody can become a judge. All you gotta do is win. Once you win, then you're your highest title. Then you're a judge. You serve the 4-year terms. After that, you can also run for a county judge, which there are 254 counties in Texas. So if you don't have that written down, write that down because you might need to know that we have 254 in Texas. The district courts actually handle the felony cases and things like that. Also, if a juvenile is being tried as an adult, um, the Court of Criminal Appeal, the Court of Appeals, handle most of our cases in Texas because they don't make it to the Supreme Court or Court of Criminal Appeals. Um, and I believe we left off right here with one of the highest courts in the land, which is the Court of Criminal Appeals. It's the highest criminal court in Texas. It's not the highest court in Texas. It's equal to the Supreme Court. It's one of the highest courts in Texas. It's half of the highest courts in Texas, right? Um, and we talked about the capital punishment. We talked about that there, the death penalty, and how it went away for a while and it came back. There was one, the argument has been made over and over about the Eighth Amendment, whether or not the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishment. But the argument is that um, it's the state's job to get justice. It's the state's job to keep people safe. And if you're a threat to people, then the state is going to get rid of you in your life and things like that. So, you know, there we go. Texas has always been known putting people to death. There's a story that talked about from the late 1800s that talked. It's a compassionate judge in Texas. It was a write-up, a newspaper article. I have to find the excerpt from a book so I can show you all. But um, I know the book. I just don't know exactly where it is. I got to see if I can find it. But he talks about a compassionate judge in Texas in the 1800s. Right. He says that this guy, he was found guilty. Right. He was found guilty of murder and he was sentenced to death. And the judge ended up writing him a letter um, that evening after he was sentenced. He told him, "Look, man, I'm telling you, in my own words. He's basically said, look here, hey, our winters are cold. Like, we don't even have a lot of blankets. A lot of these windows are broken in the jailhouse. So, that would be terrible for you to have to suffer. So, to alleviate any stress and suffering, we're gonna go ahead and have you hang tomorrow morning after breakfast." And the newspaper article called him a compassionate judge. You know, just keeping them in there, I guess, would be cruel and unusual punishment. So um, there's also the thing is like, what is this here? So when you are put to death by with the death penalty with lethal injection, so what do they put on your death certificate as cause for death? Like, what do they label it as how you died?
Is it labeled as natural causes?
It's not. But that's a good guess.
As a heart attack?
That's
No. So
okay.
this
That's another good guess.
A stroke? I don't know.
They stroke and injections. No, they actually label it homicide.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so the state recognizes that they are murdering someone. Yeah. Now the thing is this here. First off, so you got two things going on, and the first one is just from the state's point of view, which is if we don't do it, it's the state's job to get justice and to maintain order, and the state is going to have to do something to maintain order, and to hopefully discourage people from trying to do stuff in the future like this, right? But there's the other thing as well, which I've always looked at Trayvon Martin's parents and thought that they were clearly amazing people because I've always felt like someone killed my son going to get some Skittles and tea, but somebody got to die. I mean, I don't understand. You can't just walk around smiling. Somebody else got to go. You know, so so the state is here to prevent, revenge as well. That's another reason. So
Professor, something that I read on the book is that the injection, it paralyzed you, but it caused a lot of pain. So it just doesn't, it's not like the peaceful, peaceful death that sometimes they can do that and you just die very peacefully. But this one supposedly it inflicts a lot of suffering and pain into the dying person. So the punishment is escalating by cruelty as well.
okay. Well, thank you, Attorney Kathy, who's arguing against that death penalty. I see what you're doing. No,
No,
uh,
I'm not arguing about it. I'm
no,
just saying that it's not so.
I'm just joking.
If it needs to go, it needs to go.
No, but no, so our old medication, right? I'm just messing with you. But our old medication, it worked like that. It's supposed to numb you. It's supposed to slow down your heart. It's supposed to put you to sleep, and then do that there. The problem is that the drug manufacturer who put out all of these medications for people to be put to death said, I know that we're making a bunch of money and our stocks are going to tank, but we did not go to medical school to kill people. So we're not doing this anymore. And that's what the medical company said. And with that, like they didn't have any medication. So if you remember like 10 12 years ago that they stopped all death um right you know all of the proceedings because they didn't have any, right? And then Texas, tech, and then because I remember the state of Arizona was supposed to put someone to death, and they didn't have any medication. So the state of California said, "We got extra. Here you go," so they can finish off the guy. But this happened. But to your point, Kathy, you know, I was going to mention this, and thank you for sort of you know leading us down there. So if you remember, it was a guy when they were trying different medications. It was a guy in Oklahoma who they gave the guy the injection. He was supposed to fall asleep. He woke up, and to your point, it was painful, right? Because he woke up apparently, and he said something on the line of, "Oh man," and then he started shaking, and then he had a heart attack, and they were trying to bring him back so they can kill him in a humane way. I don't know. You know what I mean? So, and ultimately, that's when they had stopped all death penalties, because, or at least stopped the proceedings of putting them to death until they got it under control. So, to your part, Kathy, I don't know if they're getting all the way to sleep. I think they're getting mostly asleep before they put them to death because that other company had the ingredient. I mean, they had the perfect formula, I guess, um, to not having any pain and things like that. Um, you don't have to label who the actual murderer is on the death penalty. I mean, I'm sorry, on the death certificate. It's just, hey, you know, this person died by because they were, you know, because it's a homicide and things like that. But you don't have to put in who the murderer is. There is no murderer. There is just justice, right? That's essentially what it is. Right. All right. Let's check out this clip here.
She is the presiding judge over the state's highest criminal court. But now, Sharon Keeler's job could be in jeopardy. KVUE political reporter Elise Hu has more on efforts to impeach the judge.
Resolved that the House of Representatives of the 81st Texas Legislature hereby...
Texas lawmakers have the power to remove judges from the bench. State Representative Lon Burnham thinks it's time to use it and impeach Judge Sharon Keller.
President Clinton was impeached for lying about a sex life. This woman walked off the job and it resulted in the death of somebody.
For those on death row, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is the court of last resort. Keller presides over the 9-member panel.
She walked off the job at 5 o'clock in the afternoon rather than hear the appeal of a person on death row.
In September of 2007, Keller refused to keep her office open past 5 p.m. to accept a last-minute appeal from death row inmate Michael Richard. Richard was executed that night, even though earlier in the day, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered all executions to be put on hold.
She denied him due process, and he's dead because of it.
He certainly was guilty from everything we know about this case. But even the guilty are protected by the United States Constitution.
It led to protests and nearly a dozen judicial complaints against Keller. Now, lawmakers can opt to remove her from the bench.
I'm getting a lot of encouragement to proceed on this.
Keller isn't commenting, but her job could now be judged by state lawmakers. Elise Hu, KVUE News.
So, what do you think? So we get the judge who ultimately is, so we get a ruling that all death penalties have to stop, right? They all have to stop today. And she's like, and she lets it go through. Like she didn't pause the thing. Here's the thing, right? So when you're in a state like this, so when you're at the Supreme Court is an elected body, and I've said this before. You know, when you look at a Federalist Paper 78, I know we've talked about the Federalist Papers. These are the papers that ultimately, these are the papers that the framers, the people who created the Constitution, used to convince us to adopt the Constitution, right? Remember, you had people who were not in favor of the Constitution, like Thomas Jefferson and some of those guys, right? And then we had people because they wanted the states to have the rights. And then we had people who were in favor of the Constitution because they wanted the federal government to have the actual last say, right? And in the Federalist Paper, they're making their argument about this new type of government. And in Federalist Paper number 78, right, which is written by Hamilton, who was in favor of the federal government having the last say, talked about how the Supreme Court needed to be appointed. It needed to be a lifetime appointment, right? Because these guys won't have to be concerned with an election, right? So when you're concerned with an election and with lobbyists and all these things here, because you got to win, then you're more likely not to rule in a neutral manner, right? So this is why a lot of judges are appointed. When you get her, right, who is not appointed, right, she's elected, you know, and I understand everything. It's terrible because he says stop, it's supposed to stop. But she's also elected, right? The Supreme Court in Texas is elected. The Court of Criminal Appeal in Texas is elected. All these courts are elected. And if you get elected, that means that you can be voted out. Imagine those ads. This guy here killed a baby and did this here, and she decided to stop his death, so the family had to suffer longer, right? And you know, I should be concerned about the family suffering right now, but in her mind, she's not concerned with the family and suffering. I'm pretty sure in her mind, she's concerned with the fact that the dude is a criminal. He's supposed to die anyway. And the fact that I'm not going to win the next election unless I allow this to happen. Right. So you got all of that stuff going on. And so, yeah, you know, I just wanted you to kind of see that, you know, it does matter when it looks at, you know, when you start looking at appointments and you're looking at elections and things like this. I tell people that judges being elected is not always a great thing. It's sometimes bad. And judges being appointed is not always a bad thing. It's sometimes good because you know you're not going to lose your job, right? No matter how you rule, which means that you're more likely to rule in a neutral manner. The other high court that we have in Texas is the Texas Supreme Court, right? We have the Court of Criminal Appeals and we have the Texas Supreme Court. So this is the final court of appeals for civil cases, Remember, the criminal cases, the highest court for the criminal case would be the court that we just flip off off of the previous slide, which is the Court of Criminal Appeals. Now, this court also handles one type of felony, a criminal case. So, which criminal case does the Supreme Court handle? They only handle one. Does the Texas Supreme Court handle? Does anybody know? Well, if a child has been, so if a child is being tried as an adult to the Supreme Court, it doesn't go to the Court of Criminal Appeals. Again, you got to be at least 35 years of age, a resident of the United States, a resident of Texas, and you got to be a lawyer, or you have to have been a judge for at least 10 years. Now, mind you, these guys here, they get, like, you can technically make it to the Supreme Court in Texas without a law degree. What do you think of that? You can make it to the Supreme Court of Texas without a law degree. And once you get there, if you look at that third bullet, the Supreme Court gets to decide the rules and regulations and what it takes to become a member of the state bar. You can technically make it to the Supreme Court with without a law degree and have a say over people trying to get a license with the state bar. And I should tell you, all you got to do is win an election in Texas. If you win an election and become the justice of the peace, you got to take a 40-hour course if you're not a lawyer. But know what happens after that 40-hour course? You become a member of the Bar Association. You become a member of the Bar Association. As I told you, we have a justice of the peace here in my town. And the justice of the peace, and she's a judge. When they talked about her education, like she was running against someone and they had graduated from some law school or something. And her education said, took some classes at ACC. Now, I work at ACC, so I'm not going to downplay ACC. But what I am going to say is, taking some classes at ACC is probably not enough to be the judge. But at least she took some classes, so that's good. Okay, everybody understand those? Cool.
Professor, I have a question. How hard it is to become a justice of the peace to win the election? Is there a lot of people that runs on these elections?
Okay, that's a great question, right? How do you get elected as a justice of the peace? How do you get elected as a county judge, but especially justice of the peace, and you have no law degree? Well, you basically just go out and you campaign and stuff. And a lot of times, like you don't have to even debate anyone. Right? Just sometimes you just don't debate. Just go out and knock on doors and get people to vote. There are times when people do vote. There are a lot of people voting. So we have the Justice of the Peace races, and a lot of times are during the off-year election races. And sometimes if it's a new race, if it's a new seat, then you can get appointed to it, and you're automatically there. And now, every time I refer to you, Kathy, I won't call you Kathy. I won't even call you Ms. or Mrs. I'll say judge. Like once you're there, then you're your highest title. And so let's just say that Zion and I are going against each other. And Zion has graduated from a law school and he's a lawyer. And he's been an attorney for like 15 years. I'm not an attorney. If we're debating and I'm running as a Republican and he's a Democrat who apparently, an educated Democrat, right? And I'm saying it like that because that's how I'd be talking to him in front of our voters and things. If we're up there and he said he didn't even go to law school, how are you going to elect someone as a judge who didn't even go to law school? I would simply look at Zion and say, you see, guys, this is what they do all the time. Just because I didn't go to some big liberal law school, then he thinks I don't understand law, right? I guess he wants to, I guess I wasn't taught to rule in a way of allowing these criminals out on the street. I can say all kinds of things like this. And I can just go on a rant, and people will think, oh, he did go to law school. It's because he didn't go to one of these nice ones that they're talking about that. And people in Texas don't like people who think they're too smart. So that's how you win.
And you can say that you took some ACC classes.
No, I'll say that later on, like once I'm already in. I don't think that she would say that now.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm sorry, I don't think that she would say that leading into that election. But like now, if you're there for a while, then you can say it. Because even if you did, because think about it like this here, right? Bill Gates, he didn't graduate from college until later on. But Bill Gates is only hiring people who graduated from college. You know what I mean? So just because you need a college graduate, a college degree to actually work at a place, that does not mean that the guy who started it had one. You see what I'm saying? But we're never going to look down on Bill Gates for him being a terrible boss or a terrible CEO, right? We might look at him for giving us a COVID shot that now I'm magnetic. And whenever I'm trying to put something, metal down, it sticks to my hand. I'm just joking. But, but all in all, if the judge is there and the judge has shown that she can do the job, which our judge has, then that's fine. She's going to keep that job, but we're not going to let whoever comes up next have it. You see what I'm saying? So it's just one of those weird things where I think that she was elected at a time when everything was a little smaller, when people weren't paying attention to things like that. Now it's a bigger deal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, and look, all I need is just a couple of cases on Fox News that shows how a criminal has been released and went out and killed someone. And not just released, but released in a Democratic city. I'll just use that against Zion. So he goes to a fancy college so that he can release criminals out on the streets. So what good is the college if everybody's dead? What's good is it? I don't know. I do all kind of weird stuff with that. And it works. 3% of our judges in Texas have no law degree. So, all right. Da-da-da. So, the question that you all were all wondering, can you explain the whole thing about the juries and all that there? Sure, I'll explain it to you. So a grand jury. So a grand jury is a jury who decides whether or not there's enough evidence to go to trial. They're deciding whether or not there's enough evidence to go to trial. Right? An indictment. An indictment is a formal written accusation that is issued by a grand jury against the party with the crime. There we go. I want you all to see that. So I want you to think about it like this here, right? An indictment is basically being charged formally. So a grand jury take a look at something and see, is there enough evidence to even go to trial? And once they realize that it is enough evidence, that they've seen enough on there, right? So a lady is just saying a prayer and rebuking a guy, and he pulls out his gun and shoots her, He's like, she's gonna throw some hot coffee on me. I thought she was gonna throw it on me, so I shot her. Because his partner was even like, I didn't feel like I was in danger, and he shouldn't have killed her. The grand jury looks at that and says, yeah, I think it's enough evidence to go to trial. And when they say that, then you're indicted. Then they actually write it out and say, here it is. You are charged with murdering a lady with a pot in her hand or whatever. It doesn't mean that you're guilty. It just means that that's your charge. A true bill is an indictment that has been approved. So once it's approved by the grand jury, it's called a true bill. And county courts have a 6-person juries. District courts have 12-person jury, and you're selected from a driver's license list. So, you know, you've probably wondered if you've ever moved to a different place. Man, like I just got a license and I got jury duty. Or if you, you know what I mean? Because they're like, well, we've been getting all these other people this whole time. We got some new blood in there. Let's bring them on. And yes, as a, you know, there are ways out of jury duty that people tend to find, right? You're over the age of 70. That's normally not one because they tend to show up. If you're a student, you can say, hey, I'm a student. I can't do it. I'm sorry. What's the interesting thing about the third one? In custody of a child under the age of 10. What's interesting about that? It's 2025 people. It's not just women. It's anyone with the custody of a child under the age of 10. But have you all ever asked yourself how old does a child has to be? How old does a child have to be to stay at home alone? Have you ever asked yourself that? What's the right age? 12? D said, I don't trust mine until they're 12. That's, if you're a single parent, I don't think it matters if you're a single parent. He's like, well, look, it's 12 if you're married, but if you're single, 9. You know, dang. I don't know why that's okay. So everybody's saying 12, 12, 12. So let me ask you, did any of you walk home from school? And were you under the age of 12 and 11 when you got home? And did you have a key? And did you go in by yourself? You know what I mean? So we got all of these questions here. You know, I don't know if this is us leaving the kid there or the kid just going home alone by themselves. I don't know what the whole law is and things like. All right, D, you're gonna burn. You're gonna burn something down. All right. I guess you know. I would argue that if the state law says under the age of 10, then that means that you can be at least 10. You know what I mean? Because you can make the argument that even if it says 12, right, then you can make the argument, well, the jury duty clearly says under the age of 10, right? So there we go. But I just wanted you to kind of see that and things like that. I know I've looked at a lot of things and a lot of them said, hey, look, it's really up to you and how you know your child. Just know that if anything goes on, like how would you handle it, basically as a juror, right? A hung jury is a jury that is unable to agree on a verdict after a suitable period of time, right? You're just basically like, I don't agree. No, I think he's guilty. They're like, man, he's clearly not guilty. I think he's guilty. And you can't come to an agreement. Now, it doesn't allow the guy to get out of jail. Like he don't get out of jail, he's still there, or he doesn't get out of jail, he's still there. But we just have to have another trial. We just have to have another trial. Okay. So the states do elect judges, right? Most of them. Some states do allow the governor to appoint the judge. I understand why we can't appoint the judges. It's because of E.J. Davis, right? Because he was appointing a bunch of people who hated the conservatives. He was appointing a bunch of liberals who hated conservatives. So that's why it didn't work so well for E.J. Davis, right? So it changed the system that we have in Texas. But I'll tell you this here. Jury duty is one of those things where the county clerk does choose from a list of things. And I remember because, I'm from Galveston County. I remember we had we had a bunch of cases that were kind of weird cases and stuff. And we get his new county clerk. I believe her name was Latanya Wilson. That was her name. And people would tell me, and I would talk to folks, and they were like, I just had jury duty. I got jury duty again. And like, this is what folks were telling me. And I'm like, for real? And I'm like, and they're like, yeah. And I would get the summons as well. But I'm like, I'm a student, man. I can't go. You know what I mean? Or I'm a student. Yay, I don't have to go. Depending on how, I don't know. It's hard to know where my whole mind was. But ultimately, so she gets in and she's sending out jury duty to people. So she gets kicked out of office. So she doesn't get reelected. You know why? Because as county clerk, she was sending jury duty. 80% of jury were people of color. She was like, I'm going to fix this system. It's a bunch of old white people always on the jury. I'm going to make sure that don't happen again. And she clearly did it, which is illegal. So they voted her out. I don't know how you all feel about jury duty, but a lot of people didn't think that she was doing the people a favor. So here's a chart. Here's a slide that I always like to run through, especially to help students get some participation points and things like that. So I don't know if you've seen some of these before, but should we decriminalize the victimless crime like drug use or prostitution? Like, what do you think? You think it should be decriminalized? What about drug use? Let's start with that one there. Should we decriminalize drug use? What do y'all think? The pros are you get to do drugs. The con is that you don't have to go to jail. Okay, you said yes. Okay. So which drugs are you fine with? There you go, Emily. Emily, are you fine with marijuana? You think that should be decriminalized? You think all drugs should be decriminalized? Like, what do y'all think? Or just some? Okay. What about prostitution? You think that should be legal? Should it be decriminalized? And I had a student from, my gosh, which country is she from? She's oh my gosh, I can't. It's by Germany, and I can't think of the country. But she was like, she said that is decriminalized in her country. She says that the sex crimes in her country are the lowest, some of the lowest in the world. They don't have pimps. They have bosses. They have time off. They have retirement. They have all kinds of things. I don't know. I don't think it was that one. It's a different one. But so ultimately, like Dee said, her argument was the same thing. It's a place that you go to work at. It's just work. What about the three strikes law? You get three felonies, and yeah, like Emily, you're right. They can make a lot of money. Um, I just, okay, I'll make the other argument. If this is a normal job, would you want your child to want to work there? You know what I mean? You like, wouldn't you rather work at McDonald's? Nah, I think I'm gonna go work over there. So I don't know. Um, the three strikes say you get three felonies and you're in prison for life. D disagrees. What do y'all think? How many felonies are you okay with, D? Four felonies? Five? What's the number? Or
I
does it
don't
depend on the type of felony?
I think it depends on
It
the type of felony. Like if it's a non-violent felony, like that's different than, if you're going out and killing people or assaulting people.
Okay.
I I'm gonna agree with you, Zion. I definitely agree that it depends on what type of felony. But I feel like most felons, once you have a criminal background, it's hard not to reoffend because they make it so hard for you to go back and be a productive member of society. So most of the time they have to reoffend just to be able to sustain in life.
This is an argument that that has been made many times. That once that when you look at the school to prison pipeline, right, it kind of works like that. If you get, imagine going to high school so that you can learn something and leaving school with a felony. Imagine that. You're already set up a certain way. And now it just messes you up for the rest of your life and things like that. Even when it comes down to financial aid for school and everything else, it's hard to get back on track.
It's,
Zion, I thought you had a comment, Zion. Sorry. Go.
no.
Yeah, it is hard to get back on track. And then I think about things like I know people that have been in the system and they will get out and they'll put them like on probation and parole and things like that. And then they'll have fees associated with that. But then they can't get a job because they have a criminal background, but then they have to pay those fees in order to keep their freedom. So most of the time, what they do, they'll go out and sell drugs again or commit another robbery so that they can pay those fees. So I don't know.
Well, look, I, you're making a great point. I'll tell you about 10 years ago was this argument over whether or not people with felonies should be allowed to get jobs, right? Now, historically, I've told my friends or buddies or classmates or people in from the neighborhood and all that who have had felonies. I've told them, I said, I wouldn't. I said I wouldn't even tell them that I had a felony. I give my job. At least I get 3 good months of pay before they find out that I got a felony. I'm gonna let them find out on their own. I'm not telling them that because you're gonna use that against me and things like that. And I just, I look at it like that there. But about 10 years ago was this argument as to whether or not felons should be able to get a job. The issue is that felons couldn't get a job because, so let's just say that I'm working at like Whataburger, right? And John and I get into it, and he's a felon, right? So in the past, if John grabbed my head and slammed it on the grill and burned the side of my face, I can sue the company, right? Because they hired a known felon. Texas looked at that and said, okay, look, John did that. The company didn't do it. It was John. So Texas said, we need to move to just punishing John and not the company. Now, you might think to yourself, this is something that benefits the company because now the company can't be sued. Yes, sort of, but it also benefits people who are felons, as Dee mentioned, allow for them to sort of make their way back to society and reestablish themselves into society as a productive citizen. So, what was the main argument in favor of this? Well, I'll tell you. The argument was this here is that we have restaurants and many places of business that are hiring people who are not here legally. And we don't know if those people are murderers. We don't know if those people are drug dealers. We don't know if those people are doing anything, but apparently they can make a meal, so that's fine. So why not allow people who we at least have the record on to go work there and we can keep up with them? At least they are productive members of society. And as Dee said, now they can repay those fees and things like that. And that was the argument made then. So here we go. What about the Constitution? Does the Constitution make it hard to convict people? You know, I legally looked in their home, searched their home, but I found drugs though. Does the Constitution make it harder to get convictions? I would
Well,
argue no. You got to do your job. Someone about to talk. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say that it's not making it so hard right now with everything that's happening. All the Constitution is not being honored.
Isn't that so random? Like, it is so random. Like, who would have, like, if I would have asked y'all last week, like, where do you think, ICE is going to show up this week? What do you think is going to be the hot spot for immigrants, according to ICE? Who would have guessed Charlotte, North Carolina? Any of you? I don't think any of us would have guessed Charlotte. Just like most of us wouldn't have guessed Portland, Oregon as a place. We're like, that's so random. It's a random place, right? And they arrested all these people. If you remember them rappelling down in Chicago and into that apartment complex and arresting all those people, remember that? It looks like a commercial being made or something. Almost all those people were citizens, and they were released. The crazy thing is that we are kind of back to 2010 and 11 and 12, where we know that anything brown is not supposed to be here. And we know you're not supposed to be here because you're brown. That tells us enough. There's a good chance that you are an immigrant, right? And if you're not, it's one of these things where you got to prove that you're not. The state of Arizona was like that for a long time. People walking around having to have papers with them, being concerned about just getting pulled over for no reason and stuff and being searched. And now we got it all around. All right, so it's sad stuff. It really is. So does punishment deter crime? The fact that you know that you're going to get punished? I mean, think about it. If we had a 24-hour day of the purge, you think it'd be a lot of crime? If we had the 24-hour purge, you can go and just do whatever you like without any rules.
Yeah, because I got a list of people I would hit up first.
Bruh. Oh, that email I sent Zion. I'm on his list. No.
No, you're not on it.
I'm not on it yet. But
No.
let me stay off of that. Yeah, that's the thing right there. So clearly it shows that the punishment does deter crime, right? I remember back in the 1990s. I was in high school or junior high or something, and I remember it was a guy. He was the son of the ambassador to Singapore. He's out there running around with these kids from Singapore, spray painting cars. Now, if you didn't know, you do not break a law in Singapore. That is not something that you do. It is you can do it anywhere else. You don't do it in that place. If you don't litter, you don't do anything there. It is it is zero. Um, like the policies are strict. So this guy here, who Bill Clinton had to call the leader of the country and say, "Hey man, that's the ambassador's son." He was like, "I know, but he has to have a punishment." He got 23 or so lashes. It was a public caning. I don't know if you ever heard of this, right? I guess because I saw the dude. The dude is dressed like a Sub Zero, or he's dressed like what we would consider a ninja, right? And he has this stick that's sort of a cane, right? It's like a sugar cane kind of stick, and he makes a 180 turn and hits you in the back. There we go. It's a bamboo, right? He makes a 180 turn and hits you in the back 20 to 23 times. That's what that guy got. I often wonder if we had something like this, if you're speeding and a police officer can just slap you in your mouth on the side of the road and tell you to slow down, I wonder if people wouldn't speed as much, right? I've often wondered about that. Does the punishment, seeing the punishment, does it deter crime? Or do you think it even matters? You think people have their mind made up and they're like, I don't care, I'm going to do this anyway?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the values of the person. Uh, if they feel that taking the full responsibility for their action and the consequences, if they understand that since they are small, so the upbringing. And it has a lot to do with discernment, even though that people can receive an example of excellent core values, they still may choose to do the wrong thing. Uh, but I do believe that values has a lot to do with it from the nuclear of the home.
Okay. Okay. I think that's a good point. But I'll add to that, Kathy. Some people also they teach, with those values, they teach their kids to follow the law. Make sure you don't break the law. That's one of those values, right? And if law says you get 24 hours to do what you want, and you're not breaking the law, I wonder what people, how much that actually stands. You know what I mean? Because the punishment sometimes is words like, "Ooh, I would do something, but I'm gonna let them make it because I don't feel like dealing with this here." So, but good point. Uh, well, D, um, um, your kids are gonna be worse than you because your kids are not at home at 8 years old cooking for themselves, so they're not gonna learn the same thing, as you do better and stuff like that in life. Then your kids have less to worry about, and their stresses are things that you didn't even think about as stress because you didn't have to worry about that as a child. So yeah, at least that's how I feel. Um, what about trying juvenile as an adult? Should you try juvenile as an adult? So think about the worst crime you can think of. So I took a baby. So somebody took a baby, they put it in the microwave, started the microwave. I know I gave you a crazy scenario, but I just want you to think about the worst thing that you can think of. Should you try juvenile as an adult at any time? Okay. He said in case of murder. So
I
you
think it
shouldn't charge him
depends
until
on like
26. D.
their
I'm sorry.
I think it depends on like where their knowledge is at. Like if they're knowledgeable to like know what they did is like wrong, like then yes, because you know sometimes if it's like a younger child, then that would be different. But like probably like the ages 8 and up, I think it's reasonable in some cases.
So you'll go down to 8 to try an
Yes,
8-year-old as an adult. Okay. So Zion is trying 8-year-olds as an adult.
I mean because at that point you have a you know what's right, what's wrong.
No, I'm just starting to get a picture of who's on your list. So the 8-year-olds down the street. Uh, no. um, certain point. So, okay, so let me just get a consensus. Are y'all fine with the age of 12?
For me,
Okay.
not really. I feel like it has to do with like the mental capacity of that child because I feel like a lot of children mature differently depending on where they are, like where they grew up, and like the type of parents that they had. So I think it would definitely have to depend. I would not try someone as low as 8 as an adult though. Maybe around like 15 and up.
So would you have to be in high school age, according to you,
Yeah,
Karina, to be
yeah,
fine?
like at least high school age to be tried as an adult.
Okay. That's what it sounded like you were saying. That's why I was trying to get a thing. So what if um, the seventh grader walks in, shoots up a bunch of people in the school? Does that change anything for you, or?
That one's hard, but honestly, no, I feel like they should still. I don't know. That one's kind of hard, but I feel like they should still be tried as a child.
Okay. Now, when you are underage and you do, even if you are tried as an adult and you do murder someone, you can't be put to death. They don't do that for children. You know what I mean? I mean, but so let me leave you with this part here. So I'm sitting in a hearing, um, in a committee hearing in 2011 or so, and Wendy Davis says, I want to put forth this thing here. She said, I want to make it so that if anybody kills a child that's 12 and under, they will be automatically put to death as a capital punishment crime. If anyone kills a child, the Republicans that they voted no, that they said no, no, we don't want to sign on to that. Let me tell you why they did it. Well, they did it because if they signed on to this bill, and you might be thinking to yourself, the Republicans are terrible people if they don't want to sign on to if you kill a child, it should be a capital murder. They didn't want to sign on to them saying that a 12-year-old is a child. Because to Zion's part, who's probably read the law, a juvenile, a juvenile is anyone over the age of 7. So a child is 7 and under. A juvenile is anyone over the age of 7. So when you see these 8-year-olds that have handcuffs on in school and stuff like that, it's technically legal because they're juveniles. And the state of Texas didn't want to sign on to them not being juveniles because once you say a 12-year-old and under is a kid, you can't try them as an adult. You can only try a juvenile as an adult. There we go. Thank y'all very much. I'll see you on Thursday for a small bit of time. No, actually Thursday. I have to email you. I'll let you know.
Yeah,
Because I believe that we have, what's Thursday?
we were gonna have the movie.
Actually, we have a video Thursday. So Thursday you'll be checking out A Class Apart. So that'll be on Blackboard. A Class Apart will be on Blackboard under course content. So you'll be able to see that. So you can watch it. And then we'll be back again next week. Okay.
Okay, and we can watch it at our own time.
Yeah, you can watch it in your own time.
Okay.
All right. Thank y'all. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.